All right, welcome back to the Sooner Surge. And before we get started, make sure you hit the red subscribe button there in the middle. Turn on notifications so you can be alerted for all the videos we'll be putting out. And yeah, it's day before OU Texas, but we're going to talk a little recruiting tonight. In specifically, I mean, we all probably saw the Hayes Fawcett um, tweet the other day about the decommitment, and then we saw C.J. Jackson decommitted from Georgia Tech. So Brody, it's a guy that has been in the camp at OU, I believe, earlier in the year. Just kind of give us the rundown of him.
6'4", 220-pound defensive end, four-star recruit, very talented. Visited Oklahoma twice. He visited the 21st of, and then he visited June 3rd. So that was when the camp was June 3rd. So he's been in April and he's been in June, April 21st and June 3rd. So he's been in campus. Oklahoma was recruiting him. He ultimately committed to Georgia Tech. He's from Georgia, so Tucker, Georgia. That's kind of where the Georgia Tech connection comes in. But essentially, he's pressing the restart button in his recruitment, and there's going to be multiple schools tapped in here. Maybe Georgia, LSU could get involved. Colorado is going to be some tough competition, and we look at Oklahoma's defensive line class, and it's sitting at David Stone, Jane Jackson in the middle, and then you have Danny Okoye, Wyatt Gilmore on the ends, and then
Nigel
you
Smith.
also have Nigel Smith, who's kind of like a tweener. But C.J. Jackson, I do think Oklahoma will take one more defensive end in this class, and maybe they push for C.J. Jackson. I think it's certainly a possibility. He already has visited Oklahoma. I wouldn't be shocked if they do make an attempt to bring him in for a visit soon and probably try to rekindle what they had before, and maybe even pull off a big. This would be a pretty big get. Landing C.J. Jackson. He's very talented. I think a lot of people are kind of don't realize like how highly touted CJ Jackson is. I mean, he's a top 200 player, top 15 edge in the class. And he's got the frame you want. He's got the body size you want. He committed to Georgia Tech in June and just decommitted this week. So this is certainly one to watch for Oklahoma.
Yeah, and you talk about kind of where he's ranked, top 200, top 15 edge. I mean, if OU were to flip him and get his commitment, you're talking, I mean, out of the defensive linemen that OU would have committed, how many would that be in the top, I don't know, 20 to 25 defensive linemen? That's quite a few, right? And I mean, if I'm thinking right, the only one that's not probably in there is Wyatt Gilmore, correct?
Yeah, it depends on where you look. Obviously, David Stone's top three. Nigel Smith at his position is number 19. And then you have Wyatt Gilmore, number
Okoye.
21, and Danny Okoye. And it just depends on which site you choose to look at. Danny
Well,
Okoye
well,
is, yeah.
I was just going to say C.J. Jackson at 6'4". I mean, man, that's another guy physically. I mean, you look at a guy like P.J. from last year. You look at Danny Okoye, real physical, a big guy, and then this guy at 6'4". And like you said, he's four-star, top 200, highly recruited guy, and there's going to be a lot of big schools in on him. So obviously, like you said, rekindling that connection. Uh, but I think it's more like you said, they can get him in for a visit. I think that's where the key lies. And if they can get him in, you pair him up with Okoye, with Wyatt Gilmore as an end guy. And this defensive line class, I know when people say, they think it's done or whatever, and there's other guys that come up like this. You got him, and then of course everybody talks about Nwaneri later in the year. Who knows on that? But just disregard Nwaneri. If you could get C.J. Jackson, that would bump you up even higher. I mean, that as far as than where they're at now, it would be just an outstanding defensive line class.
Yeah, you have David Stone ranked number 3 or number 2 among all defensive linemen. Nigel Smith number 11 among defensive linemen. Then you go bump over to the edge position. You have Danny Okoye ranked number 10, and C.J. Jackson, who we were talking about in this video, number 15. So I think it's certainly a possibility. Again, the schools I'd watch would be Oklahoma, Colorado, LSU, potentially Georgia if they want to go there. I mean, obviously he's from Georgia, so you got to assume that they'd be a player there. And there's going to be many more schools. I mean, when a top 15 defensive end hits the market, there's going to be a lot of teams that are very involved there. But I do think Oklahoma will be involved. It's just a matter of how hard they push. And in my opinion, I think they're going to push hard for CJ Jackson.
Hey, were you surprised he committed to Georgia Tech in the first place?
I wouldn't say surprised. I mean, he's from Georgia, so that's it makes sense, right? But
Well,
it
I
is
mean,
Georgia Tech, and
it kind of makes sense, but not really. I mean, if you're that highly touted of a defensive end like Georgia Tech, they just in the football realms, they just haven't been that good.
well, I heard they lost. I saw somewhere where they lost a pretty embarrassing game. It was who was it? It was Bowling Green. Bowling Green beat them
They're not very good.
27. So I think that definitely played a factor into what we see with CJ Jackson now decommitted. But I mean, part of it makes sense. You can go, home state, be the guy. But once you see them lose to Bowling Green, I think you're kind of like, man, I could go elsewhere and be much better. But this is one I think all Oklahoma fans got to really keep an eye on because CJ Jackson, I mean, he's not just a late addition that's 3-star. No, this is a top 15 defensive end. This is a very talented defensive end who has a lot of potential. And like we mentioned, he has visited Oklahoma in the past. He's visited Oklahoma twice, camped at Oklahoma in June and took a visit. So he's familiar with the campus.
Well, and as I kind of close it here, you look at a guy like that, and that's the thing. We've talked about this kind of through this whole defensive line cycle this year about you got to be in the top 2 or 3, really, right? And we've said that over and over again. And here's where something like that really plays a part: is not in the top 2 or 3, but if you have a previous relationship with somebody who then decommits, you're already ahead of the game. For instance, on this with CJ Jackson, if there's schools coming after him now that weren't in the first time, they're kind of a little bit behind. Whereas you got a school like Oklahoma who has that relationship already. I think it just helps in the long run of this recruitment that they've already had that previous relationship. Guys like Chavis and stuff like that. So I think that bodes well for the Sooners. And I think we'll see here in the next. I don't know when he's going to commit again. I would think he's going to run this out for a bit. Now that he's reopened it, so
he'll take some visits.
Yeah, he'll take some visits and do all that. So, but there you have it, guys. I mean, that's a decommit from Georgia Tech, CJ Jackson. And once again, guys, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Turn on notifications. You can also see down there at the bottom our other socials for X and podcast for Spotify there. I still can't get used to saying X, but I did it.
Twitter.
I say Twitter. That's what I should say. Sark calls it X, right? That's a joke, inside joke. But hey, it's it's Friday night. Texas still sucks, right? Big game tomorrow. Make sure you're subscribed. A lot of content. We're going to do a live later on tonight, but hey, big night, big game tomorrow. So let's get ready for it. Till next time, guys. Boomer.